Details leaked from inside the New York Mets. David Stearns had a press conference after the trade deadline to answer reporter questions, and fans absolutely loved what he had to say, proving why he is truly a great president of baseball operations. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into only here on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. We're going to talk David Stearns and this presser, but first we got to talk about some subscribers, and that being the fact that 69.9% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here at Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. And we are going to start it off with the voice that we are going to mainly hear from today overall, and that of course being the president of baseball operations himself in David Stearns. He starts it off by saying the story of this deadline is really some unrecognized offices, saying, I think the story of this deadline for us is really an amateur talent acquisition and player development story. Our amateur talent acquisition departments and our player development group put us in position to be able to have this type of deadline where we're able to go out, acquire players that we think are really going to help us in the major league level to go win it all, and not touch some really high upside players at the top of our system. Enormous credit to them to be able to bring that type of talent into the organization, and then once they're in the organization, to help them get better. And Stearns is completely correct. Normally, fans, reporters, people that watch baseball, they look at the players and the coaches, the GM / president of baseball operations, sometimes even the owners, and that makes a lot of sense, but sometimes the story is a lot deeper, and it's in these departments that aren't as well known. For example, maybe a player is doing really, really well because of the nutrition that he's getting. Therefore, the nutrition department and the nutritionist is really the story of that player being hot. Or, like this trade deadline that Stearns is mentioning, the amateur talent acquisition team did a good job scouting players internationally and domestically, finding the best talent, not wasting high picks on them, and then player development doing a good job of making them into top prospects that then Stearns can, of course, flip and not touch his top prospects, his homegrown top picks, and he doesn't have to waste them in a trade deadline move, and then he can develop them even further using that player development group, and then they can be a big piece of the MLB team moving forward. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the overall trades. I did a trade reaction video, so go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. I did also a video on every single guy that the Mets went out and got. Gregory Soto, Tyler Rogers, Ryan Helsley, and Cedric Mullins. So check those out if you haven't already. But I'm going to go over something similar here to just prove that David Stearns point. All of the subtractions are here. Of course, the first two are from the Orioles, then the next three are from the Giants, then the next three are from the Cardinals, and then the final three are from the Orioles. That corresponds with the given moves of Soto, Rogers, Helsley, and Mullins. So let's dive into these players. Starting off with Wellington Arcena. First and foremost, none of the top 7 prospects were traded. Not one of them, which is awesome and goes to this Stearns point. Starting off with Arcena, though, he was signed as an international free agent. Not saying that those guys aren't important. They most certainly are. But all you spend is international bonus pool money. You don't waste a pick on these kind of guys. So great job overall to just get him as an international free agent. And of course, he was paired with Cameron Foster, a 14th round pick, to go get Gregory Soto. Moving on. Tyler Rogers, one of the biggest names on the reliever market. They got him for Jose Butto, who signed as an old international free agent with the Mets at 19 years old. Most international free agents sign at 16, 17, maybe 18 years old. So 19 is pretty old. Blade Tidwell, who, yes, was a second-round pick. That is the highest pick that a Met gave up, that Stearns gave up, that was formerly a Met. Of course, Drew Gilbert was a first-round pick, but he wasn't a pick of the Mets. Another good move. It wasn't David Stearns this time, because this was back in 2023, but we flipped an aging Justin Verlander who was expiring on his contract, and we got Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford. Gilbert, of course, a former first-round pick, and then we flipped him to go get Rogers in this trade deadline. As for Jesus Baez, also signed as an international free agent. Top pick was not wasted on him. Nate Dome, yes, a third-round pick, so a top pick, but it's fine because you got Ryan Helsley, and he really showed how good he was last night. More to come on that. As for Frank Elisott, 19th round pick by the Mets, and then this last deal was incredible. That's exactly why David Stearns said what he said and why reports were coming out about it. In this Cedric Mullins deal, really no Met talent was given up. There weren't any guys that were truly, truly Mets that you wasted a high pick on. Starting off with Anthony Nunez, who was a 29th round pick of the San Diego Padres. We've heard he's got a cool story going to D2 after the MILB didn't work out, went back to school, then became a Met. But we didn't waste anything on him. Moving on to Ramian Gonzalez, signed as a late international free agent as well. He signed late. And Chandler Marsh, a UDFA. So all of these guys, we didn't really waste anything. They weren't top prospects. They weren't top picks. They weren't even top international free agents that we signed. They're UDFAs, late IFAs, and late round picks from other teams. So great job by David Stearns. As let's turn it over to one last thing before we go back to Stearns, and that of course being injury updates on Jesse Winker and Jose Siri. I have talked about this before, but it doesn't look promising on either front. They are both still a long ways away from returning. Stearns is hopeful that both of these guys will return this year, but it won't be until at least September, if not later. That was a part of Stearns' press conference, but we've been over that a few times before, so I felt as if we shouldn't quote him there. But turning back to the quotes, let's talk about Cedric Mullins. He said, "We have been having off and on conversations with Baltimore, clearly, about a lot of different things over the last couple of weeks. Mullins' name has been part of those discussions throughout. We were looking at this segment of the market even before this direction for Wink became clear." That's why I mentioned the Winker and the Siri injury updates. But certainly as it became evident that Wink's absence was going to be a little bit longer, it made us look even harder at this segment, especially left-handed bats. And a great job by Stearns not to give up too much to go out and get Luis Robert. You all know how I felt about him. I did not want him whatsoever. They were asking for Jonah Tong and Mark Vientos in return, our number 2 prospect and one of our third basemen, if not our DH. Absolutely not. No way. And Stearns did a great job, again, going back to this quote of using some talent that really wasn't even Met homegrown, and he went out and got Cedric Mullins. So a great job there. But what was Stearns' thought process on the center fielder? He said, "We like the player. We like what he brings on both sides of the ball. The athleticism. We talk a lot about ways that players can impact games that may not always show up in the box score, and we think Cedric has the ability to do a lot of that. We think he's going to fit in very well to how we run the bases. Of course, when you pair him, who's a good stolen base guy, he's got about 140 career stolen bases, including 14 this year. You pair that with Antoine Richardson as your first base coach, very, very good. That's going to really equate to a lot of stolen bases and a lot of good base running from Cedric. How we want to play defense and center field. Of course, he can play center field, and he's a solid defender. We like the quality of center field he's played, especially over the last, let's say, 8 weeks. He recovered from a little bit of a hamstring tweak, and since that point, we think he's played a really quality center field. He has. He had a play that is going to go down as one of the best defensive plays in all of baseball in 2025, just to prove that point even further. I think there have been some very real approach changes versus left this year, hence the 866 OPS versus left-handers and nearly 300 batting average from him, and so that's great to see. If he can continue that, I'm certain he's going to find his way in the lineup at times versus lefties, so I'm excited to bring him on the team. Of course, the Mets were facing a lefty last night in Robbie Ray, so he was off the bench. He came in, pinch hit in a clutch situation, unfortunately popped up, but he should be in the starting lineup today. Now, getting Cedric Mullins, this should put Jeff McNeil solely at second base, right? Well, not so fast. As Stearns says, I think Jeff's still going to play, obviously, a lot. He's swinging the bat very well. He's having a great offensive year. I imagine there will still be some outfield opportunities at times, which surprises me because the Mets have 3 solid outfielders in Nimmo and Mullins and Soto, and Tyrone Taylor off the bench. So I am surprised that McNeil, as the 5th outfielder, might get some opportunities from time to time. There's going to be second base opportunities, obviously. He'll probably start at second for the most time, I would assume. There's probably going to be some DH at-bats there at times, which also surprises me. I think with our left-handed hitters, there's going to be ample opportunity for all of them because the Mets have a lot of left-handed batters on this team. And it's just finding where the piece is going to fit on each day in the lineup. Basically, he is trusting the skip in Carlos Mendoza. So, What about the young guys? Is he trusting Mendoza with that? Yes, he is. He says the good news is there are a lot of bats to go around. When you're talking about a couple of infield positions, an outfield position, DH at bats, there are a lot of at bats to go around. I think all of those guys are going to get plenty of time. Is there going to be one or two guys on the bench every day? Yeah. And then they're probably going to get a really high leverage pinch hit or at bat late in the game. Cedric Mullins, your perfect example last night. Brett Beatty also had that. Ronnie Mauricio. It's also a balance. This is part of breaking young players into the major league level. I think our young guys have responded really well. I think at the end of the year, we're going to look up, and the vast majority of our younger players who have been at the major league level are going to get a really nice amount of playing time. I think we've seen that benefit them over the course of the year, and I think it will continue to. Absolutely, it has. Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Beatty, and Mark Vientos have all been pretty hot of late, despite splitting some time. And overall, Carlos Mendoza is good. He's done a really good job overall at getting pretty equal playing time. Brett Beatty's been playing third, sometimes second. Ronnie Mauricio's getting in there at third. Mark Vientos has been playing third sometimes, but mainly DHing. Overall, it's been a nice balance from Carlos Mendoza. He's done a really good job of that. Of course, Luis Angel Acuna was not in that mix. He just got sent down an option to AAA. Go ahead and check out that video if you haven't already. But for the remaining three young guys, he's done a pretty good job at balancing the playing time. Now, speaking of the young guys, what were his thoughts on getting rid of both Drew Gilbert and Blade Tidwell in that Tyler Rogers deal? Well, he said there's no question they're good players. Proximity to the major leagues certainly factors into these types of deals. Blade Tidwell, of course, very close to the major leagues. He's been in the majors before with 4 career games. We believe we traded a number of players who are going to play on TV and will continue to play on TV, and I hope they do. These are largely really good players, good people. We're rooting for them. So, of course, they're probably going to end up making the MLB. But we were in a position where we thought that these deals made sense. Giving up good players to get players who can maybe help us in a little bit more concentrated fashion right now to go win it all. And this makes a lot of sense as well. I've seen a lot of things online where it's basically, hey, Met fans want to get a bunch of really, really good players, but they don't want to give up any of their top prospects. That's obviously not how it works. You have to give good talent to get good talent in return. It's never an easy decision to make, but we felt like, and I felt like, they were the right decisions to make right now. So, speaking of position players, did the contracted position players, you guys like Juan Soto, who signed for 15 years, Brandon Nimmo, who signed through 2031, did these players impact decisions almost like we are in a certain window, like a win now window? Well, Stearns says, I don't view this as windows. Our responsibility here is to give ourselves a chance to make the playoffs and ultimately win a World Series every single year. That's what this should be. That's what we're aiming to make it. So I don't view this period of Mets competitiveness in a defined window. I view it as the beginning of what should be a very long and sustained period of competitiveness at the highest level. I think the moves we were able to make the last couple of days certainly helped that this year without sacrificing some really high upside special talent that could help us in years to come. Now, speaking of contracts, did he solely look at guys that were going to be free agents at the end of the year? Keep in mind, Soto, Rogers, Helsley, and Mullins will all be free agents at the end of 2025. Did he just overlook guys that had long contracts because they're going to cost more? Well, he said, as we evaluated the market, the players available, and what teams were looking for in return for those players, these were the deals that we thought made the most sense for us. We certainly were open and engaged with players who provided multiple years of control. Think Sandy Alcantara. There were rumors about him. He was heavily rumored. Luis Robert still has another year of control in an option. In fact, 2 of them. Also, Edward Cabrera was rumored. Guys like that who have a lot of control left. Mitch Keller. But at the end of the day, these were the ones that we thought made the most sense for our team, for our organization. Really happy with the players we were able to bring in overall. And I agree, overall a great job there by David Stearns at the trade deadline. So moving on, Stearns was asked if other NL teams like the Phillies in the National League East, teams like the Padres, did they impact Stearns' decision with what they did at the deadline? Well, he says it really can't influence what we're doing. I think we're focused on following our plan and our strategy. If we get too influenced one way or the other about what one of our competitors is doing or not doing, I don't think that's going to lead to the most productive behavior on our end. So, we focus on ourselves, executing our strategy, ensuring we're making every decision with the best information possible in the best manner possible. If we do that, we'll probably end up in a good spot, and I completely agree. You can't be looking at the Philadelphia Phillies or the San Diego Padres, who had a very big trade deadline. They made a lot of moves. You can't say, oh, look at how active they are. We need to be more active. No, if your goal is to get ABC player, which it looks like Stearns was, obviously he had a lot of players on his list, but I think his goal was to get Soto and to get Rogers and to get Helsley and to get Mullins. You need to focus on getting those players. You need to focus on the 3 bullpen arms that you want to go get. You need to focus on the center fielder that you want to get, and maybe the starting pitcher that you want to tap into. Video coming on that later, and actually more of a discussion on that in just a little bit. So overall, I completely agree with Stearns on this point. Now, this was most certainly a very competitive market on the trade deadline. Was the reliever market as competitive? Well, Stearns said, yes, it was competitive. Absolutely. And it should have been competitive there. There are a lot of teams looking for arms. Not a lot of teams out of it as well. We knew that we went after some arms that we think are pretty talented. And so we expect it to be competitive. It was, and I think we saw that throughout the day today. Even some of the deals that went down to the wire looked like they were pretty competitive deals. Yes, it was a very competitive trade deadline. Not a lot of teams out of it. Not a ton of sellers and a lot of buyers. So overall, yes, it's going to be very competitive to go outbid other teams to go get certain players. So let's talk about two of his biggest, arguably his 2 biggest acquisitions in Tyler Rogers and, of course, Ryan Helsley. Well, he said, I think first and foremost, both those guys can get outs, and they can get outs in high leverage situations against both sides of the plate. They're experienced guys. They can take the ball, and they do it differently from one another, which was another thing that I think was important for us to bring in some different looks, and it absolutely is. Tyler Rogers is a guy who throws a complete submarine, almost touches the dirt in his windup and throws 84 miles an hour. As for Ryan Helsley, arguably the most over-the-top guy that you can get that is consistently pumping 99 to 101. Completely different pitchers, different looks. Certainly, someone like Rogers provides that. So I'm very excited to be able to bring in 2 guys like that who have success either at the back end of games or close to the back end of the game in true leverage environments in big spots. Of course, Rogers was a big 8th inning guy, and Helsley, he was a closer. We think both those guys are going to help a lot. Now, speaking on Ryan Helsley specifically, is he different from Edwin Diaz? They're both pretty over-the-top, hard-throwing guys. Well, Stearns says they're 2 very good, experienced closers, and the two guys like that who are comfortable in the back end of games. To have that, it just makes us better. It gives Mendy a few more options as he's trying to figure out how to get from mid-innings to the 27th out. That's all that matters. Go get that 27th out. Go win a ball game. The more guys you can have back there that you have confidence in, I think the better. Hopefully now we've got quite a few that we can get big outs for us in big spots. So we talked about the reliever market. Let's turn it over to the starting pitcher market. Why didn't they get a starting pitcher? Again, more to come on this with a separate video later, but Stearns says there were some starting pitchers that were ultimately traded. Yes, Merrill Kelly. He was probably the best starting pitcher traded, but not many of them. Probably not every starting pitcher that was rumored to be traded or was available was ultimately moved. Absolutely. Edward Cabrera stayed, Sandy Alcantara stayed, Mitch Keller stayed, all these guys stayed. And so we were engaged, as I've said throughout. I think there are multiple ways to build a pitching staff, and we focused on the back end of a pitching staff, the bullpen. That's exactly what the Los Angeles Dodgers did last year. They beat us in the NLCS running 2 bullpen by committee days, and then of course won the World Series. So yes, that strategy can certainly pay off if you have a dominant bullpen. We're really happy with the arms we were able to acquire who are going to pitch out of our pen. And we have confidence, not only in the starters who are here, who we think are going to keep us competitive and help us win games, but we are also pleased with the development of some guys in AAA. So speaking of that, what about Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean? He spoke to both of them, of course, AAA guys right now. He said, I think they can help, and I think it's just a matter of their continued development, which they're doing a really good job of. Then, when does the opportunity arise, and is it the right time? I think both those guys have taken very nice steps forward in their development. We're going to continue to challenge them. We're going to continue to ask them to get better and work on things. But they're doing a good job. And if we need someone from AAA, I think we've got people down there. There's certainly among them who can help us. Stearns has talked before about potentially bringing up some AAA guys, McLean and Sproat included. So we'll see if he ends up doing that in the future. Speaking of guys that are currently in AAA, what about Paul Blackburn? He was supposed to be traded at this deadline, according to Stearns. Well, what's his future? He says we're going to have to see. Paul's got one more rehab start. We'll see how he gets through that, and we'll go from there. We'll talk it over with Paul to see what makes the most sense after that. I probably don't see him in the Met future plans, so we'll see how that ends up panning out, but I don't see him being on the active 26-man roster, at least me personally. So, last guy to go over, Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes, of course, has been very shaky as a starter of late. So, what about him going to the bullpen? What did Stearns say? Because he was asked this. Well, he said, I think Clay, from a physical standpoint, is in really good shape. That's good. He's pitched a lot of innings, by far the most in his career, and he's still good physically. I think the stuff, for the most part, has still been there, but we got to get a little deeper into games. Obviously, it seems like Holmes and really every starting pitcher besides David Peterson cannot reach the sixth inning. Clearly, Clay knows that. He's working hard to do that, and I think we'll be able to see it. That's not something that we're contemplating right now, moving him to the bullpen. Let's see how our roster plays. Let's see how things come together, and then we'll get into August a little bit. We can really plot more with a little bit more creativity what September looks like when you've got the extra roster spot. So that makes a lot more sense. It looks like Stearns right now is going to continue to have Clay Holmes in the starting rotation, but he'll reevaluate during September call-ups when you get the extra roster spot, and then we can make a decision from there. So go down there in the comment section. Let me know what you think about David Stearns' presser. Personally, I loved it. I loved his trade deadline. I give him an A, like I said. And we got one more video to come on the trade deadline, of course, about that starting pitcher market. So that'll be coming soon to you. Here, only on Mets Digest, your best place for Met news. Unfortunately, though, that's all time I have for you in this update. Thank you so much as always for watching, and let's go Mets.